Hello, my name's Jeff Gill, and I am giving some fourth graders a tour of the Newark Earthworks. And I am glad to welcome you here, and I'm figuring out how to make this video stuff operate properly. And it's something we're all learning a lot about this year. So anyhow, my name's Jeff. It's good to be with you, fourth graders, teachers, anybody else who gets to watch this. But let me flip this back around and let's get going as we look at one small part of the Newark Earthworks. We're going to start with this map. And in the classroom, you've probably seen maps of the Newark Earthworks as a whole. Let me kind of come in a little closer on this. And as we look at it, we'll see what's actually an 1848 map of the Newark Earthworks. We use these old maps because so much has been lost in the intervening years as the city of Newark kind of grows from east to west. We've lost an awful lot of the ellipse and the square, but the Great Circle, which is where we are down here, and the circle and octagon still exist, have been preserved. And for that, we're very thankful. We are here at, as I showed you a bit there in the opening pan, on one corner of the Great Circle, a circular embankment that ranges from 4 or 5 to 14 or 15 feet high to give a level top around a 1,200-foot circumference. 1,200 feet. That's the height of the Empire State Building, laid sideways. That's 4 football fields. And we are about to enter in to one edge of the Great Circle there with the E on it, and we're going to walk in roughly from here to the interior and the center point, and then back out to the doorway, to the opening that points to the north and east. So with all of this in front of us, I just want you to remember, as we experience through video the Newark Earthworks, that you're looking at just one small part of what 2,000 some years ago was a 4.5 square mile complex of interconnected geometric earthworks, the largest such complex anywhere in the world. That's one of the main reasons why the Newark Earthworks are part of the Hopewell Ceremonial Earthworks submission to the United Nations Education and Scientific Organization, the UNESCO, and the World Heritage List. We expect the Newark Earthworks and the Ohio Hopewell Ceremonial Earthworks, including Fort Ancient and the earthwork complexes around Chillicothe, very soon to be part of that World Heritage List, because these have outstanding universal value. They represent human achievements. And what Native Americans accomplished here some 2,000 years ago, we can still experience a part of. So we're going to enter here through these stairs up and over. It's one of 2 appropriate places to enter the Great Circle. One last look at the map, and you'll see the openings where the circle kind of turns out and towards the northeast, and there's a doorway there which will actually go out. This stairway was built by the Civilian Conservation Corps. And before we go in, I'll just jump back to about 1933 to 1938. You'll see across the grass there a brown house, and there's some warehouse type structures. And then often in the past, we've started this tour at that picnic shelter. That picnic shelter with the big walnut posts was once part of Camp Mound Builders, a Civilian Conservation Corps camp, which during the Great Depression had about 6 dormitories and a dining hall and a theater. And for the summer, because they didn't have air conditioning back then, they built a picnic shelter for themselves. For the young men, it was all young males who could join the CCC, could come and work for about $1.25 a day. We've lost the dining hall and the theater and the dorms, but there are these remnants, and it was Camp Mound Builders as a CCC camp that led to this becoming part of the Ohio History Connection, part of our Ohio historic preservation. And one of the last things along with that picnic shelter they built was this bridge and set of stairs. So we'll climb the stairs, and now you're looking inside to the interior of this remarkable space. As we come down onto this bridge, well, it's a bridge because it goes across a moat. We just came over the high exterior wall, which is the circumference of the Great Circle, and on either side of this bridge, a very deep moat. Now, when the first European American settlers came here in about 1800 and realized there was this huge earthwork here, they called it the Old Fort, because they thought, well, there's this big space enclosed on the inside, walls for defense perhaps on the outside, and a moat. It was a generation or so before I think young people, bright young people like you fourth graders, said to their seniors, if it's a moat, why is it on the inside? Shouldn't a defensive moat be on the outside? So you might ask, why is there a moat? Why is there this deep ditch, which would have been almost as hard to dig as the walls would have been to build? Why all the way around this, well, nearly a mile circumference, why did they dig it? And like so many things about the Great Circle, the only accurate answer is we don't really know. We have suspicions. Cultural anthropology and modern Native American understandings give us some hints and suggestions, but we don't have written records from 2,000 years ago. The Native Americans, whatever they called themselves, we don't have that record. They saw themselves as human, they had a culture, and we'll talk just a little bit more when we get to the center of the Great Circle about some of what we know about their life ways, their understanding. But we don't know exactly why they built this. But we do have Native American friends and associates who tell us that they did leave some written records behind. They left these earthworks, that geometric complex of 4.5 square miles that you saw on the map. It's been called native knowledge written on the land. So let's go further into this vast document and see what we're looking at. Now from here to the top of that series of low mounds connected in the center of the Great Circle is of course 600 feet. It's 1,200 feet from side to side. The doorway, the entrance to the northeast, you see here to our left. And I'll just pan one more time from the entrance to the northeast, across the center, and then all the way back around to the moat to our west, to our right. So what's going on here? Now we do have some amazing trees here in the center of the Great Circle. We have reason to understand, because of an archaeological excavation that was done right about there in 1992, that about a third of the volume of the wall would have been dug out of making the moat. So the moat alone didn't allow you to pile up that wall. In fact, they learned, archaeologists did when they studied the soil profile down the side of the trench that they created to take that narrow slice out of the surrounding wall, that you have the moat soil, and then there were layers of clay on the inside and on the outside. Brightly colored clay, which was neatly laid and then capped across each other at the top to create this incredibly stable structure. It's not stone, but a well-made earthwork can endure for hundreds, indeed thousands of years. But when they got to the bottom of where that wall was built, they tested the soil and were able to determine through looking at microscopic pollen grains that in fact when this was built, this whole area seemed to be a managed prairie, almost certainly burned off at regular intervals, and trees would not have continued. Every time you'd get little woody shrubs and stuff to grow, it would be burned off and the prairie grasses would continue. Now, today we have this incredible array of old-growth trees. In fact, that's one of the many different layers of history and prehistory that we have here at the Newark Earthworks, because from the 1840s and on, this area was preserved as the county fairgrounds until the County Agricultural Society went bankrupt in the Great Depression, which is how Camp Mound Builders ended up here in 1933. But since it was for so many years the county fairgrounds, they kept the old trees for shade. Everywhere else in Licking County, 200 and 300 and even 400-year-old oaks would have been cut down, but not here. So old growth trees, one of the many things that we're helping to preserve in this many times reused location. So we're drawing near to the center of what's been sometimes called Eagle Mound. Can't quite see it from here. We're going to go up on top of it because in 1928, Eagle Mound was excavated by what was then called the Ohio Historical Society's archaeologist, Emerson Greenman, and he excavated right down to ground level. And what he found told him a little bit about what was here before this mound was built. And since after 1928, 1929, the CCC came and rebuilt this, we can walk on top of it. It's a reconstruction. A little more recently, and I think about 1993, a more contemporary survey was done. And this was determined to be pretty close to the center point, the absolute center of the Great Circle. Let's go all the way around from the end of the eagle or the arrow here mound. I'll tell you more about that in a moment. Around to the north and the stairway you see there. To the east-northeast. And the opening where the walls break and the moat points out as well, and the tip of Eagle Mound. Can you kind of see the point? The two wings and the body of it that we're standing on right here from the center point. And then on around to the east and back again to the south. So we have this circular enclosure, the high walls, the moat inside, and then we have the Eagle Mound. That again is our term. We don't have written records to know exactly what Native American people called this, but if you can see on this video, one wingtip and a line that connects to the nose or the tip here, and then another wingtip, the two sides of the arrow, and then I'm standing at the end of the body. This larger rectangle, Emerson Greenman in 1928 found at ground level a rectangular perimeter of post molds with larger post molds on the corners and every so often along the sides. What that seems to indicate is that we had a big house, a long house of sorts, a ceremonial structure with a clear doorway, at least at that northeast end, facing the doorway of the Great Circle itself. And then back here at the center point, where later we put the survey marker, right here in the center of this big house was a clay basin, a fireplace, elongated northeast to southwest. So almost certainly right about here where we're standing, a smoke hole. So we have a house. It's open to the northeast, the doorway pointing towards the opening in the Great Circle, and then a line of post molds, not a room, not defined space, just a line of post molds with a big post at the wing tips. And this southeastern wingtip, intriguingly, if you stand there for the summer solstice, the longest day of the year and the shortest night, if you stand at that wingtip and sight along the left-hand side of the opening where the moat is, on that dawn, it almost looks exactly as if the sun rises up out of that ditch. That's the furthest north that the sun rises. Now, this main alignment, this is intriguing in its own way, because if you go straight down the center line of this longhouse, out its doorway, we know from the post molds, and through the center of the great doorway here of the great circle, well, we're almost exactly at the halfway point between the solstice and the equinox. And there are other earthworks, like Alligator Mountain and Granville, that have that same alignment. And there are many cultures which mark those midpoints between the solstices and the equinoxes as the time of turning for each of the seasons. We continue here in Newark with the Newark Earthworks Center and other institutions and organizations to be in dialogue with today's Native Americans. And they talk to us and they share some of their stories, and we share with them some of our scientific analyses, and we continue to learn and marvel at what was accomplished here. 7 million basket loads of soil were moved to build these earthworks. Was it just to mark time, whether the movement of the sun within and beyond that gateway, or with the octagon, which is itself about a mile or so to the north and west, a circle connected to an 8-sided figure whose central alignment seems to help to anticipate and know the 18.6-year cycle of moonrises on the northeastern horizon. Is it all just a calendar? Almost certainly not. It had, we believe, many purposes. And I'd like to draw the parallel as we look back around to the east and to the south one more time before we leave Eagle Mound. You may know of a horseshoe-shaped structure in Columbus along the banks of the Olentangy River. And there, well, certain ceremonial activities happen on Saturdays in the fall. We call it football. But, you know, commencement happens there sometimes, and other great community events, concerts, even Beyonce has been there. So would you say Ohio Stadium is built entirely for football? The answer would be no. That may be its primary purpose, but it's a place of gathering. And we also note in more recent history, we had events, Civil War veterans gatherings, and of course I mentioned the county fair was held here for many decades. In fact, in 1854, this space was host to the Ohio State Fair. For some of those events, upwards of 20 to 30,000 people are recorded to have sat along those embankments and watched and listened as events took place right here. I'm standing in the middle of what was, for the fairground area, a racetrack. Horses raced each other. In fact, one famous race was between a person, a motorcycle, and a horse. And everything from, as I said, the 76th Ohio Civil War reunion to Buffalo Bill's Wild West show to more recently, community bicentennial events. And this space, especially if it didn't have the trees in it, the walls, while high here at the opening, lower at the back because this plateau slopes from southwest to northeast as we get closer to the South Fork of the Licking River. But this area inside is acoustically quite interesting. Was it designed to be a gathering place, an auditorium in the literal sense of where many could gather and hear? Or was it a place where just a few conducted ceremonies inside the big house that later had a mound built over it, which we today call Eagle Mound? We don't know. But as we come to the northeast doorway, which opens, if you remember, or you have in front of you, that larger map, whether the Squire and Davis 1848 map or another version, you know that on ahead of us is the square, almost entirely obliterated except for a small piece of it off of James Street, and beyond that the ellipse, which is where our best understanding is that almost all of the burials that were part of the Newark Earthworks took place. That along Union Street is almost entirely invisible to the naked eye today, but buried pieces are still there in back lots and railroad embankments. But we are very proud that here at the Great Circle, we can come and see and seek to understand how Native Americans in ages past and how pioneers and settlers and early citizens of Licking County made of this a place of gathering, a place even of pilgrimage. So I'm glad, even though it had to be just by video, that you came here today, and I look forward if you need me to answer further questions as we all as a community seek to preserve, to present, and to understand the Newark Earthworks to each other in Licking County and around the world.